evening, wherever you are. And thank you all for joining this session on managing urban rivers, reinventing the River City Connect. This session we are talking about a very important topic, and we are going to look at cities on the rivers of India and other parts of the world. The session is convened by CV and UNDP's Water Governance Hub and the Water Governance Hub for India that has been set up by NIUA, CV and CEPT University. So we are all very happy to welcome you to this. The whole issue of cities along the rivers is very peculiar. The cities depend on, and civilizations and human civilizations have occurred along the river or along these water bodies. So water is drawn, but then the waste is all dumped back into the river. So the same water that is used to sustain cities is also being polluted by cities. And we will hear from our keynote speaker about the problems that the main river of India, the river Ganga, is facing. But I think this is a worldwide problem. And I think what we are going to listen from the keynote speakers and other presenters and the panel discussion is that what have been the various attempts to manage cities along the river, and how do we manage the river? Because that is, at least in certain cultures, the river is the life and river is the goddess. And how do we get back to recognizing the value of river? Because that is the theme of the whole World Water Week as well. So without further ado, let me introduce our keynote speaker, Mr. Ashok Kumar. He is the Director General of the Namami Gange program, and he's a civil servant of 1991 batch of the Indian Administrative Service. Has had a range of careers in aviation and power sector, but more importantly, I think his last stint in the Ministry of Water, the Jal Shakti Ministry as we call it, where he promoted water harvesting on a large scale. So he's also known as the Rain Man of India. And so we are all looking forward to hearing from him. Over to you, Mr. Ashok Kumar.
Thank you. It's nice and wonderful to be in the World Water Week, because this is very, very prestigious conference, and we have been closely associated with it. And last meeting also, 2019 also, along with Rajesh sir, we had visited and had our exhibition and all set up in Stockholm. So this time online we are there joining. So it's very, very very, very prestigious to join this program. Now I'll start off with the presentation here. The river is very, very important, as was mentioned by the moderator. The role of river in Indian mythology, because as he rightly mentioned, the Ganga is considered as Ma Ganga in India. So there's a lot of reverence associated with it. And not only the river Ganga, most of the rivers in India are actually worshipped as goddesses. So despite that, we find that many places the rivers are the dumping ground of waste. The tendency to dump the dirt and the waste is very, very prevalent across all the towns. It's a lot of behavioral change which has to be addressed in that. And these are now getting a lot of attention, particularly after the Namami Gange program, which was started up in 2014. the focus on the government, to ensure that no untreated water flows into the river Ganga. And the success which we have seen in the last many years in Ganga mainstem particularly has inspired other rivers, other people from other states also to call for keeping their rivers clean. And the NRCD, the other arm of the ministry which looks after the cleaning of the river, also has taken up a lot of projects. I will start off with the presentation. Next one. Next one. So a basic idea of the water scenario in India, it's 4% of the fresh water resource available, and only with 18% of world's population. So there is a lot of water stress is being felt, though it is a statistical phenomena. If we can get the water supply and demand managed, as was mentioned earlier, if the rainfall is properly captured and then stored the water, probably we will be able to address a lot of issues of the water stress. Nevertheless, statistically speaking, India is a water stress country, and with the spatial and temporal variation of rainfall, some of the areas are facing drought, while at the same time probably some other area would be facing floods. So that is the scenario here. And if you look at the statistic again for the sewage generation and treatment in India, the total sewage generation as per the calculated norms of 135 milliliters, liters per day to the urban areas, the 80% of that comes back as sewage. So we calculated the 72,000 milliliters per day is the total sewage generation. So this figure may be disputed because the actual supply in many of the areas is not as much as 135. So it could be about 40,000, 50,000 milliliters. The total treatment capacity so far is about 31,000 milliliters per day. And in this also many areas, probably some of the STPs would be non-functional and many of them are non-compliant. So, but however, for statistics purpose, we take that the total treatment capacity is about 31,000 milliliters per day. And the gap from the statistics speaking is about 4,000 milliliters. So the demand of water, we look at it, almost 634 is the total demand on 2000 to the year 2000, and 2025 is projected to be 1,093. However, if you see the demand of the water in the irrigation sector actually totally swamps the other demands. 85 to 90% of the water usage is in the irrigation sector, and as the population increases, probably we'll have to produce more food, and our irrigation demand also would go up. And that's where if you notice from 2025 to 2020-50 period, you find that the water demand would be more than what we get. So there is a lot of demand supply management to take on, and also find out how we can augment the supply of water by reuse and reducing by recycling the water, by in fact using the water multiple times, or that is the reuse of water, and of course by reducing the consumption required by proper increasing the water use efficiency in industry and agriculture. Next one. Next one. So these are some of the main key schemes in the water and wastewater sector in India. The Amrit 2.0 was launched from 2021, October 2nd. So this is for a 5-year period, especially looking at the water sector. About $39 billion is the estimated budget. We have the smart city mission also addresses a lot of water issues in the cities with a targeted budget about $3 billion. Namami Gange from 2014 we are going on. It's a budget of $4 billion, and it has been extended from 2021 for another 5 more years with about 22,500 rupees. So this is a committed budget from the state government of India to ensure that the no untreated water falls into the river. whether it is from the sewage or from the industry. And we have this Jal Jeevan Mission Rural, which is a very ambitious project to ensure tap water to all the households in the country, and it has also been extended to the urban sector also. And Adal Bhujal Yojana, which is about $750 million, which is looking after the augmenting the groundwater potential in the country. So as I mentioned, in the supply side, last 3 years we had started this campaign, Jal Jeevan Mission, Jal Shakti Abhiyan, which was last year we converted that into the Catch the Rain campaign. The Catch the Rain campaign with the tagline, the Catch the Rain where it falls, when it falls, was launched by the Prime Minister himself. And then that caught a lot of imagination of the people, because it was one of the campaigns which break the silos of water, urban, rural, ground and the surface water. And also it brought in with a lot of people's participation in it. And because we were focusing on building small water harvesting structures, decentralized water harvesting structures, 4.8 million in water harvesting structures were created and maintained at the cost of about $9 billion. It was again a very unique program where synergy of funds were seen from the Manrega itself, funding about 75,000 crores. Then we had urban Amrit, and then the state finances funds and the state government funds, all pulling together to achieve this huge target of about 4.8 million rainwater harvesting structures. So next one. Next one. So Namami Gange, as was mentioned, it's one of the most acknowledged and the largest river conservation rejuvenation program in the world. It is an integrated river rejuvenation mission with a holistic approach, works on pollution abatement and improving ecology and flow and strengthening the river people connect. So Ganga accounts for about 43% of the population, Ganga basin, and about 28% of the water resources of the country. It has about 100 basin cities. That's where the theme for this today's discussion also. It has 100 basin cities, and we are putting a lot of effort, particularly my predecessor Rajesh sir had put in a lot of effort in ensuring that the urban issues are addressed, and then the planning for urban areas for handling this sewage, which would have otherwise polluted the river Ganga, is taken up. So despite not being a very mandated activity of the ministry, we had taken up under Namami Gange a lot of activities for ensuring that proper urban river management plans are prepared, and then capacity built for the cities on the basis of the rivers, so that they take the river seriously in the planning process. Next one. So in the we have now seen one more shift in the paradigm. Apart from the Aviral Dhara, which ensures that there is a regular flow, ecological flow in the river, the Nirmal Dhara of the unpolluted river, and people's participation, etc. We are also now focusing on the Earth Ganga, which is to ensure that there's a good river people connect by boosting economy and livelihood. So this is now one of the main focus area of Namami Gange, to ensure that the people and the river are connected through an economic bridge, and that would further ensure that the sustenance of the program. Next one. These are the 6 verticals. If you look at it, there's a zero budget natural farming, and the monetization of reuse of sludge and monetization of the treated water, a livelihood generation program, cultural heritage and tourism, institution building, and public participation. These are the 6 verticals. But the relevant one for our topic today is the monetization and reuse of sludge and treated water. We have prepared a national framework for the water reuse, safe water reuse of the treated water, that has been approved by the ministry. We have also set up the NNCG Terry Center of Excellence for water reuse. It's the first time in the country. MOUs have been signed with many countries like Netherlands, Denmark, Japan, Norway, and Israel to promote a circular water economy. And we are in the process of giving 20 million liters of tertiary treated good water to the industry, so the IOCL at Mathura. We also signed MOUs with railways, power and agriculture for using the treated water, etc. Next one. Next one. Okay, this is where the innovations which the Namami Gange had taken up for the urban planning. But I need to add one very important thing, that in the urban rivers, we found that the cities, tendency of the cities were to put the waste in that, hoping that the river would carry the dirty water or their dirt to the city down below, forgetting that there's a city above them also, which also thinks the same way and putting the dirt in that river, which comes to your city. So I mean, we are trying to convey them to the people or the urban authorities that it is for everybody's benefit that we should not use a river as a conveyor of dirt from one place to another, but it should be used as an economic asset which can enhance the value of your city, which can enhance the aesthetics of your city, which can enhance the quality of life of the city. And that has to be properly planned and ensure that the river is protected, and river is not seen in distant pieces. It should be the continuous stretch, because if I take only one part of the river and protect it, it doesn't make sense, because down below there will be some other area which should be polluting it. So, and the whole river has to be taken as one stretch and then treated it as one entity. The next one, this is the four. Sorry, just one back, one slide back. Can you go on? So this is where we have taken a strategic framework and guidelines. We have made river sensitivity master plans with the help of NIUM. A lot of capacity has been built for the urban local bodies to make this water sensitive master plans. Training was given to them, and from there we had the urban river management plans prepared. Kanpur was the first one we took up as on an experimental basis, and many cities are now interested to get this urban river management plan and make river and water bodies an integral part of their water planning, of their planning. Earlier, it was zoning or transportation used to be the elite issues for discussion. Now water has become an important aspect of it. So this is the toolkit also we have developed, the urban wetland management guidelines also prepared for the management of the urban wetland. Next one. We also in 2021 launched the River City Alliances. About 30 cities have shown interest in being a part of it, and a lot of activities have been built on the River City Alliance concept. We have developed websites for them. We are actually discussion points for them. We are actually doing training programs for them to ensure that the rivers are a prime factor in the river in the city planning. Next one. So this is the capacity building activities. We have started an online certification program with the help of NIUA, a very unique concept. A lot of people are registering and then going through this online program as per their convenience and then getting a certification. There is a blended training program by the IIPA, where we also again bring in the people of the officials of the local authorities, as well as a large campaign has been taken up for involving the students of the schools and colleges in this program. So capacity building has been taken up, and also we have prepared the Ganga basin water sensitive plans for people in those areas. So we have now come out with regular webinars, etc. we do for the urban river planning in the country. Next one. Thank you. That was the snapshot of what we were doing from the Namami side for the urban river planning.
Thank you, Mr. Ashok Kumar. I think this was excellent overview of what the Namami Ganga program has been doing very impressive in terms of its both the breadth and the depth, and particularly I think what you just mentioned about this linking your earth vikas, that in terms of linking river to the people and the economy, and I think this is excellent. Many of us are also working on river or water sensitive urban planning, and I'm sure that the contribution of your program will be very helpful. So thank you very much once again, and I do hope that you will be staying with us because there may be some questions on the chat. And this is to the listeners and participants, that if you have any questions, any queries, please put them on the chat on the Pathable site where you actually registered for the program, and we will take them up in the next segment of the of this session. So now I want to introduce Panchali Saika of CV. She is going to make a presentation on the framework for the river and city governance, and that will be followed by 3 case study presentations. So over to you, Panchali.
Thank you so much, Professor Mehta, for the introduction and for giving the floor. I think much have already been said by our keynote speaker, the DG of NMCG, and he has rightly raised some of the very critical issues that are related to governance processes and management when it comes to urban waters and also looking into urban rivers. Some of those he highlighted were upstream, downstream, where it's important to really recognize and acknowledge the need for upstream, downstream, understanding how it influences river systems and the waters in cities. He also talked about capacity development activities and also about the master plans, integrating having river sensitive urban master plans and urban water master plans and guidelines. So I think these are some of the very critical issues when we try to look into urban water management processes and governance processes. I'll not go much in detail, but just to bring a very contextual to the presentations that will be followed around the case studies and the discussions in the panel in the next segment. I just wanted to bring a framing of the discussions for today to just highlight the importance of why we really need to look into management and governance. We did understand there is a huge value, ecosystem value of river systems for the cities. It's very interconnected system where rivers provide ecosystem values ranging for provision of water resources for services, water and sanitation, relating to water navigation functions, agriculture production, wetland development, and also cultural, recreational, and not to forget the climate resilience and adaptation, looking into and also rivers are not just the source, but also sink for when it comes to climate mitigation efforts. So this is something very critical to really look into, but also not to forget that a lot of mismanagement at urban level, urban cities in terms of services that our moderator had raised about the mismanagement, or whether it could be untreated wastewater that could be discharged and polluting rivers. So there is a huge connection, and there is very much needed for this intersectoral cooperation when we talk about urban water services and looking into the source of this water supply to these cities, and which is in many cities, the rivers. Let me give you a short example here just to give a context when we talk about what challenges cities actually face. And this is more related to when we talk about the misalignment, the spatial scale misalignment. And this is related when boundaries of management do not coincide with the boundaries of ecological entity. Here is a brief water system map from Cape Town that we had done during assessment of water resilience in the city. This was to understand how the city's water systems are connected to each other and how stakeholders are actually connected to the city's water services, not just limiting to the water and sanitation departments, municipality, corporation in the cities, but also the national level actors that play a huge role. For Cape Town, you see that the rivers play a very critical role when it's connecting to the water systems in a city for the water service to be provided for the users in a city. And this is very much within the control of the national government, which is related to the South African Department of Water and Sanitation, who regulates at the national level for the river management. Whereas the city of Cape Town, which is the water Service Authority responsible for the provision of water services in its area of jurisdiction control the access of the services more related to potable water treatment, the municipal dams, providing services in the informal areas in the city. So the areas about managing rivers, the main water supply source that it comes from, the aquifers, the rivers, are actually beyond the control of the urban water stakeholders, and which is why it's very important collaboration and coordination that will help overcome the scale mismatch problem, and that should align with the environmental system. But often through our experience engaging with cities, we have seen that city stakeholders, they often don't know. There is a lack of clarity around who does what, at what level, and how the decisions are made in most often. Even within the city's urban water services, there is a distinct silo that you can find, let alone engaging with at the national level actors or at the transboundary level actors. So there is a lot of issues that needs to be really improved upon or enhanced, and which is where I really want to focus to really look into understanding this aspect of when it comes to urban water management, how it is linked to urban river management, and then also urban planning. So just to quickly give a context on when we look into urban water management, it is often seen that traditionally it has been a single sector approach looking into specific aspects around, say, that involves water supply, urban drainage, wastewater treatment, and sludge handling. And within this area, there has been a lot of concept that has come into being, like integrated urban water management, sustainable urban water management. Even when we look into the aspect of urban planning, we don't really see a lot of this aspect of how cities can maximize the potentials around river basins and river ecosystem. It's really not seen that much, except for some river restoration programs within the urban planning that we might have seen. And as I had mentioned earlier, when we look into management of river basin, that lies beyond the control of the cities. And when we look into the policy level, either it could be the national government, international agencies when it comes to rivers that actually transit the national boundaries, which are more transboundary, which is more diplomatic. We also need to engage with actors that are beyond the water sectors, maybe Ministry of External Affairs, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is becoming more at the diplomatic level. But even within countries, we have seen that there is silos when we talk about the basin management authorities engagement with the state or with the local government, such as municipal and cities. Here, just to give you a context on when we look into different decision-making level for river basins, from ranging from policy level to implementation and operational. And we have often seen that mostly the local government either is looked into as a social, economic, environmental developments, looking into some of these aspects when it comes to instruments of operational levels, such as watershed management plans, stormwater management plans, or looking into some of this behavioral change and cleanup campaigns for rivers. So this is why I really want to emphasize on looking into why governance is really critical. And this has been something we are working together with UNDP, CV Water Governance Facility, with NIUA to understand and do some research on how urban river governance, the institutional arrangement, can be strengthened to really have a synergy across what has been going on in urban water management sectors, urban planning, and integrating and making some river sensitive efforts. Lastly, I really want to really bring in focus on how we can actually do it, how we can identify some of the gaps, institutional gaps, or the silos, or how we can actually improve, is looking into and focusing on urban river governance and looking into the urban water governance aspect itself. Now, just when we talk of governance, it might really look very broad, very conceptual, but how do we really work with it? Now, when we talk of water governance, as you see, this is a framework that we had developed to guide policymakers and practitioners to implement water governance in practice. It really says that it's a combination of core governance functions that is actually implemented by a set of stakeholders, be it with the Ministry of Water, be it with together with the other stakeholders, to really develop and the water resources and water services in a country. And this could be at various levels for water and sanitation service and governance improvement, water resources, and also transboundary where it's applicable. Let's see, for example, coordination, planning, preparedness. These are some of the critical functions that key processes that the sector needs to develop in certain manner to be able to achieve any intended outcome. And here the attributes really plays a very critical role. Looking into evidence-based planning, I think this is very critical when it comes to when we talk of urban rivers, water bodies, providing water supply to services, where data is very crucial to knowing how the environmental flow is, how much of water is available. I think this is very critical for planning. Similarly, participation, deliberation is another aspect that needs to be looked into, how policies, strategies, planning is designed to be able to make water resources and services resilient and sustainable. Very quickly, I want to bring to notice when it comes to cities managing rivers, how actually these functions really takes into place. For example, when we talk of policy and strategies, I think strategies really need to look into urban river conservation when we talk of urban water strategies, also looking into river regulation, zone policies, instruments that can really help not just to improve the water services in a city, but also to control pollutions and restore the ecosystem value of these rivers. Another example that I had already mentioned about is the upstream downstream coordination, which is very essential when it comes to talking about rivers and cities that are actually sourcing water and placed in these basins. Uh, Few others I would really go very quickly before we move into the case studies. One is the Urban River Master Plan, and I think Uday from NIUA will be talking largely of how actually river sensitive urban master plans and water plans can be made and what kind of guidelines can be done. But another critical aspect with planning is also not to forget about the preparedness, the vulnerability assessment that needs to be done at the city level on the climate change impact on its water system, including rivers, how they can do some assessment to improve the urban water resilience within the city. There could be also aspects around financing that cities can really contribute, such as utilities really having the tariff design, such as the water funds is another example where you integrate a protection of source protection in your water tariffs methodology. So these are some of the aspects that really can look into about data and information I had already mentioned. Not to forget also regulation. I think this is very critical when we look into the quality, ensuring public health, environment at the city scale, reducing the losses of wastewater, the sludges to the river. I think regulations plays a very critical role, not just within the water sector, but also when we talk of cities. I think land planning regulations in cities also plays a very critical role when we look into river basin and urban water systems. Lastly, but not the least, talking about the capacity development, I think raising awareness is one of it, but also organizing trainings on how we can linkage the policies and planning of urban water management and governance with the river management, how we can increase the capacities and the institutional capacities of the city stakeholders to really understand how to manage rivers. So I will stop here, and I think most of it will be touched upon by the case studies, how we can actually practically use water governance as a way and pathway to improve not just urban water services, but also largely on urban rivers. Thank you so much. Over to you, Professor Mehta.
Thank you, Panchali. And I think for want of time, I'm not going to summarize what we've heard from Panchali, but over to you, Uday, we'll just jump it straight into the 3 case studies. I again mention that please put up your questions on the chat. And all the 3 case study presenters, please be brief, 5 minutes if you can, so that we have time for panel discussion. Okay, over to you, Uday.
Thank you, Professor Mehta. Hello, everyone. My name is Uday Bhunde, and today I am representing National Institute of Urban Affairs Water and Environment Vertical, where I work as a senior program specialist. And the National Institute of Urban Affairs, I'm sure many of you might be aware that it is a close ally of India's Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. So in the next few slides, what I'm going to present is a unique framework that has been prepared for the managing urban river stretches, which are passing nearby the cities. And this framework is a close collaboration between the National Mission for Clean Ganga and National Institute of Urban Affairs. So uh, to begin with, we all know that rivers are the cradles of the civilization, and most of the cities have grown along the river banks, and these rivers have to extent uh, fostered or fueled the urbanization processes. However, during these urbanization processes, the rivers have been affected by the anthropogenic pressures. So this diagram that you can see on your screen depicts a situation of a typical river city connect, wherein a river enters into the city from the upstream side. At that time, the river is almost pristine, or it has in the good healthy conditions. However, when it leaves the city, usually the processes that are operative within the cities, I mean, which are briefly covered by Professor Mehta also in his opening remark, moderation, and also by DG Namami Gange, that the urbanization pressure actually affects the health of the rivers. And this particular situation is mostly prevailing, at least in the developing countries, where the river and city connect is in this situation, wherein you can see that most of the peripheral elements or the hydrological elements like the water bodies, wetlands, and drains, they actually under the pressure, which are ultimately connected to the rivers. Next, please. Next, please. Yeah. So if you look, previous slide, please. Previous slide, please. Yeah. So most of the strategies which cities usually adopt, they are mainly relying on the engineering solutions like pollution abatement by construction of the sewage treatment plants or a solid waste management processing unit along the river banks. However, I mean, of course, these are not the solutions which are not required. Of course, they are required. However, usually in this particular process, cities usually ignore the other hydrological units which we see in the city are also important in terms of the river rejuvenation. Next, please. Yes. So urban river management plan framework, it has a unique opportunity to offer the cities for the holistic management of the rivers which are within their premises. And the integrated approach that is usually proposed in the urban river management plan, it combines planning and the projects together, and also it offers a unique governance mechanism which is in the form of and working groups that particularly brings all the stakeholders and the agencies which are there in the cities to manage the rivers. The URMP framework not only focuses on the rivers, but it also treats water bodies, wetlands, and drains with the equal weightage, so that the hydrology of the city is actually managed in a sustainable way. And finally, the URMP frameworks is very well aligned with the Sustainable Development Goal, which covers environmental, social, and economic elements. Next, please. Yes. So the URMP framework is basically a framework that is adaptable by the cities, and its implementation is within the city administration boundary. However, it doesn't ignore, or it takes into consideration the overall basin scale processes as well as the other elements operative in the river basin scale. Next, please. Yes. So this particular URMP framework, what you are seeing on your screen, is based on the core pillars, or three pillars, which are environmental, economic, and social, which has a specific vision. I mean, each of the element has a specific vision. Like, say, for example, economic element sets the vision that the rivers provides opportunities for the economic development of the cities, and similarly, the other elements also set the vision for the cities. Next, please. Yes, the URMP framework is based on the 10-point agenda. I mean, under each of the element, environment, economic, and social, like each of these objective are to be assessed by the cities, or the situation within the cities according to these objectives, and the cities can adopt the strategies accordingly. So this 10 agenda, or the 10 point objectives, are the core of the URMP framework, based on which the cities can prepare their URMP plans. Next, please. Now, till vision and objectives, all the river cities have to follow this framework. However, when the cities have to design their intervention or projects, it is based on their situation assessment of these 10 objectives. Like city A might not require to go for all the objectives, but the other cities, city B might require to look into all the objectives, and the cities can project based on their assessment in the city, and accordingly they can also source the finances for those interventions that need to be adopted for these 10 objectives. The URMP framework also offers a unique monitoring mechanism for under which for all the objectives, like each indicator measures the development of the URMP, and it is measured overall in the URMP index form from the scale of 1 to 5, how the city is progressing as it implements this URMP framework. Next, please. Yes. So this particular framework was implemented in one of the city. Like once we developed this framework, we thought that it should also be implemented and tested in one of the river cities. So Kanpur city, which is located in the Ganga River basin, was selected to implement this particular URMP framework. And this city, since it is located on the river, and also the other tributaries passing through that, provided a unique opportunity in terms of testing this framework. The city is famous for its academic institutions and also the tourism, but unfortunately the tannery industries they affect the river Ganga, which is passing through the city. So this was the ideal city for us to test our framework. Next, please. Yes. So to implement this framework, a unique mechanism was set in the city that was in the form of a working group, which actually acted as a driving force. And this working group actually was constituted by different stakeholders and steered by the city head commissioner, and also the technical handholding support was provided by NIUA and NMCG, and this included different agencies which are responsible for cities UR implementation. Next, please. Yes, based on the evaluation of the framework, total 19 projects were recommended, which are unique project, and all these projects were actually relevant for the city's river rejuvenation program. Some were very unique, related to water bodies, some were related to database management, and some were also related to tourism and the citizen awareness. Next, please. Next, please. And all these interventions were actually aligned with the national missions for the financial support, so that the city does not have to actually rely on the external sources. And finally, as an impact, the URMP Kanpur actually motivated the 5 river cities across India, out of which 4 are located within the Ganga River basin, and 1 is located outside the Ganga River basin, that is in the Godavari River basin. So actually the preparation of the URMP framework is now actually taking a momentum perhaps in India, and more cities, as DG also mentioned, the River Cities Alliance particularly, they are coming forward to prepare their URMP in terms of improving the situation of their cities and improve their river health. Next, please. Yeah, for that's all about the URMP framework, as well as implementation in the Kanpur city. So if you have any further queries regarding the framework, you can reach out to me at this email address, and you can also go through the NIUS website for further information where the framework is available. Thank you very much, and over to you, Professor Mehta.
Thank you, Uday, for this wonderful case study. And we're now going to look at a case study that is looking at not Ganga basin, but other river cities along the other river basins, and using more of a data framework that is available with CEPT University. Over to you, Arva.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So, hello everyone. My name is Arva Barmal, and today I'll be presenting on how the PASS SLB framework can help with wash governance for river cities. Next, please. Yeah, so I'll begin with a quick background of the PASS SLB framework. So since 2005 in India, substantial investments have been made for wash infrastructure, but very little is known as to what is the service delivery. What is the actual outcome of the investment in infrastructure that has been made? So on this very premise, the PASS framework was introduced. The framework focused on three broad aspects of water, sanitation, and solid waste management. It was introduced with an objective for scale. So for which it was implemented initially in two Indian states of Gujarat and Maharashtra, which covers more than 400 cities. Since 2009, the PASS system has sustained and it has been scaled up to more than 1,000 Indian cities, which covers more than 110 million urban population. So the thing is that the PASS framework is a digital platform. So it makes it very easy for any local government officials to self-report their data. Next. So now using this PASS information, we came up with 6 major themes. So these themes you might, they are a little bit similar to what Panchali mentioned in the earlier session on what is river governance all about. So we did a research on various global governance framework, be it the OECD, the IRCs, etc., and we contextualize this to the Indian situation. Next. Yeah. So then we did a pilot assessment wherein we chose the 2 states of PASS for which we have the PASS information, that is Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh. Now, these 2 states fall on 3 major river basins, which is the Ganga, Mahanadi, and the Subarna Rekha. So on these 3 major river basins, we've identified 26 river cities. These river cities are falling under major rivers. And the important part is that these river cities constitute approximately 9 million urban population, which is a representative of almost 50% of the urban population of these 2 states. Next. Yeah, so this is something that we've developed based using all the PASS information. Now, based on the 6 major themes that I talked about, we've developed 2 types of indicators. One is governance indicator, and the second one is service index. So the service index mainly focuses on the sanitation value chain related aspects. And the governance index is mainly on resource planning and management, what is the financial sustainability, etc. So now, as you can see from this chart, the ladder is basically divided into 4 quadrants. So if you see the lowermost quadrant is of aspirant cities. So by aspirant, we mean that these cities are not performing well in both aspects, service related aspects also and governance aspects also. Then the second are the performer cities, the yellow quadrant. This is where most of the cities are falling, and these cities, they are either performing well for service related aspects and either they are performing well for governance related aspects. And lastly, we have achiever cities. So achiever cities are those which are performing well in both aspects. Now, if you see the chart closely, you'll find that we've given a red border to cities which are larger cities. These are municipal corporations. So which kind of tells us that corporation cities have the resources, have the human resource, have the financial capacity, and hence they are performing better in both aspects. So which highlights the fact that there is a need to strengthen capacities of small and medium towns in both the states, which will help them move up the ladder. One other aspect that we can see from the results is that cities have performed well when it comes to inclusivity in the mandate as well as policy. This has translated to having higher coverage of access for sanitation related services. But again, one key concern that we have got from the results is that financial sustainability at the local level and lack of waste treatment infrastructure are key areas of concern for which attention is needed in terms of policy level interventions, administration, and even disaster resilience related efforts. So I would just want to end on the note that using an assessment using already available data or say from the past SLB framework, this can be used as a advocacy and decision support tool for local governments to take informed decisions and help them with their river governance per se. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Arwa. And as she's saying, I think this is a framework we talked about in Panchali's framework, the data-driven governance. And so here is a framework that can be used by many cities. And so we next move to Jose. So outside of India, let's look at Vietnam and how the governance and river and city framework is used in Vietnam. Over to you, Jose.
Thank you, Professor Mehta. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity of sharing our experience implementing the source to sea approach in Hoi An. So first, I will briefly introduce the concept of source to sea management and the source to sea approach, and then tell you a bit more about our experience in Hoi An very briefly. So the source to sea management is an approach that addresses these linkages that we have been talking about upstream and downstream between ecosystems from source to sea. So, you know, this includes land, freshwater, delta, coastal, and marine ecosystems. And this can vary from basins with small catchment areas to systems that span over thousands of square kilometers and across country boundaries. So in these systems, we can find numerous human activities, and usually there are urban areas within them, right? As you can see in the image on the right, that are dependent on these systems or influence them. As Mr. Ashok Kumar put it very well, the cities must understand how they are being affected by activities upstream and downstream, and how they are affecting the other communities present in the system. So we must understand that these systems are connected through 6 key flows that are water, biota, which includes both plant and animal life, sediments, pollutants such as chemicals, nutrients, plastics, materials, and this is more related towards dams and levees and physical changes, and also ecosystem services like drinking water, food, energy, tourism, health, etc. So source to sea management overcomes sectoral and geographical barriers that usually limit water managers by stimulating upstream and downstream and cross-sectoral collaboration. But how does it achieve this? So the strength of source to sea management lies on the ability to secure beneficial outcomes for the communities, the economy, and the environment by balancing trade-offs, thanks to its holistic, participatory, inclusive, and context-dependent nature. So now the source to sea approach. So the source to sea approach was created by Seaweed to operationalize source to sea management into 6 steps that follow most, let's say, common structures. So as you can see on screen, we have 6 steps, which I will not go into detail because we don't have a lot of time. But if we think of an urban river, the approach first builds an understanding of its biophysical conditions and functions, and also the stakeholders present and the governance systems involved. And then this feeds into a theory of change where a shared vision is developed of what we want to achieve, what we want to do. And this is followed by implementation of the actions and monitoring and evaluation that enables us to adapt to the changing situations that may arise. So now talking about the case study of Hoi An. So the city of Hoi An is located near the mouth of the Tu Bon River, which is part of the larger Vujia Tu Bon River basin, which is about 10,350 square kilometers. So Hoi An was recognized by UNESCO as a World Heritage City in 1999. And since then, and especially in the last 10 years, Hoi An has become a very popular tourist destination with 5 million tourists in 2018. Obviously, in the past years, it has fallen down a little bit due to the pandemic, but still a very appreciated tourist destination. So this has significantly increased the pressure on the provision of public services, but especially solid waste management, as waste and particularly plastic waste has grown together with the growth of tourism. And Hoi An has been working to improve the solid waste management and reduce the use of plastics, but this hasn't been enough, and the flow of plastic has started to affect many ecosystem services that the city depends on, and this includes the scenic beauty that supports the tourism. And you can see on the image on the slide that plastic waste accumulates in the water and the shores, the river shores of Hoi An. But this is not only due to the waste generated within the city of Hoi An, as rural communities are also contributing to this issue. These rural communities can be found upstream, but also in the coastal areas. This is because even though rural communities produce less waste in total, a lot of the waste that they generate goes uncollected, or it's dumped into informal dump sites, from where it frequently ends up in water bodies flowing downstream or upstream. So now to apply the source to sea approach in Hoi An. So CIWI, IUCN, and GIZ are working together to support the city of Hoi An in the development of a 5-year action plan to achieve a zero plastic waste city. So as a first step, we have developed studies and workshops to develop a shared understanding of the source to sea challenge that Hoi An faces. And this involves those first 3 steps. I don't know if you caught the first 3 steps, but to build a clear picture of the biophysical state, the stakeholders involved in the plastic value chain, and the governance system. So now that we also have this vision of a zero plastic waste city clear, we need to design the actions to achieve this. And this can include, reducing the use of single-use plastics, improving separation of waste types, and increasing resource recovery and recycle rates. But it's also very important to generate a shared understanding that to carry out these actions that eventually will lead to achieving the vision that we have, we require the commitment of many different stakeholders across the plastic value chain. So it's necessary to create an accountability framework where the roles and responsibilities of the stakeholders are clearly defined. And this is what we are currently working with the city of Hoi An and the local stakeholders. Now, something that it has to be mentioned, and that I mentioned previously, is that a critical barrier faced by the city of Hoi An is the lack of jurisdictional authority over the areas that are contributing a lot of the plastic waste that is flowing into the rivers and the sea. So it is essential not only to take actions at the city level, but we also must seek this coordination between urban and rural, upstream and downstream. And this is something a message that has also come across from Panchali and from the keynote speaker. So it's something important to take into account. So this is briefly the case study of Hoi An, and thank you very much for the opportunity. If you want more information, you can contact me in this email address. Sorry.
Yeah, no, great. Thank you. All the 3 case study presentations and excellent work that is being done. We actually do not have much time because I don't want to eat up on the second session, which is the important panel discussion. So, but I think we've seen the framework for river city management, and we've seen the issues that confront them. So we'll hear more from the panelists about this. Over to you, Victor, and thank you very much for the participants for your attention. Bye. Goodbye.
Thank you so much, Dinesh sir, for moderating that first segment, and welcome to all of you. My name is Victor Shinde. I lead the water and environment vertical at NIUA. And I was listening to the previous presentations, and I think two things struck me immediately. One is, there are a lot of a plethora of tools and frameworks, out there, and we just presented three of those. And all of these can actually be used so efficiently for urban management. That's one. And more importantly, these have actually been practiced. So they are not just mere frameworks, not just theory, but they've been translated into practice, right? So the translation of time of science into practice is becoming smaller and smaller, which is so encouraging and so augurs so well, for urban river management, in any part of the world, right? So we're going to just continue with that discussion now, and get a little bit more deeper insights, into the finer nuances of managing urban rivers. And I have a very accomplished panel with me here today, and I'm going to briefly introduce them, before we hear from them. First up, to my right is Mr. Rajiv Ranjan Mishra, from the National Institute of Urban Affairs. So he is the Chief Technical Advisor at NIUA, and he was also formerly the Director General of the National Mission for Clean Ganga. We also have with us Dr. Meera Mehta, who is a Professor Emeritus at CEPT University in India, and also the Center Head for the Center of Water and Sanitation at the same university. I know who heads and who leads the Water and Sanitation Department at the Stockholm Institute of International Water Institute. And finally, we have Ms. Katharina Davis, who until very recently was UNDP's advisor for climate, water, and resilience. So like I said, a very accomplished panel, and let's get straight into the questions now. I'm going to take you first, Rajiv sir, and you have been the Director General of NMCG for 5 years. And one of the path-breaking initiatives that you took in your position was to introduce or focus a little bit more on the urban element of river management, right? So my question to you is, what made you go ahead with that urban, or what made you decide to focus on that urban element? And perhaps you can tell us, some initiatives that you took in this regard in your capacity as former DG.
Thank you, Victor. As you said, I had a chance to be associated with this important and ambitious mission of river rejuvenation, rejuvenating river like Ganga. And see, when you work on such a kind of mission, which is by nature very complex, I mean, this is typically a problem where you have to deal with several systems and several elements. And I also had a chance to work in different sectors, like in water or in urban sectors in different ministries. So I was quite aware that when you go to these different silos, different ministries, I think even in a city, there are several silos. So I think one is quite aware, and then river became a very good vehicle, a good teacher for me to look at river-centric approach and try to break these silos and bring them together. All the time when we talk of cleaning any river, and certainly river Ganga, the focus or the discourse is completely upon pollution, I mean cleaning. Here we were talking of rejuvenation. So we were trying to look at a bigger picture, and I also had a chance, Victor, to be there before Namami Gange at a different level, and I could see the transition. So initially the approach was basin approach. So we were trying to look at the river basin, and more on the integrated river basin management was the approach with which this mission emerged. But slowly, because I also worked in urban system, and I realized that we all know that the challenge to the river health comes primarily from the urban system. So unless you make them your stakeholder or make them also deal with you, work with you, this is not going to work. So while working in the basin level, we were also trying to improve things on the pollution management, making it more sustainable, more PPP and all that. But I was also trying to look at giving a bigger role to the cities and not only the parastatals where basically we do construction. So I think from construction, performance of all these units is important, and bringing together the cities, the villages, and ultimately the people into this whole agenda becomes the primary focus. I'm feeling so happy that in such a prestigious international event, we are devoting so much of time on managing urban river. I mean, at one point of time, this was looking like something very new. I was trying to talk that let's go to the city, urban river management plan and all that when we were talking. In fact, I was told by many of my colleagues that you are coming from urban development to NMCG back, so you are carrying the urban baggage. But I thought that that's not a baggage, because unless you take them, I think no matter how much STPB fund and construct, they are not going to make any difference. Number one. Number two, I think the approach was to look at it like a system, not look at river in isolation. So what exactly is the urban river? I think I need not get into the details of all the tools which have been developed because they have already been explained. But the rationale behind it, the river is not just the 20-kilometer stretch which is passing through the river, through the city, but the floodplains, the riparian buffer, the groundwater, the aquifers, the water bodies in the city, the riverfront, they are all part of the river, and they are also part of the city, which often cities do not recognize. Who owns the river is a problem. I mean, many of you very rightly said downstream and upstream, and I think Panchali is told very clearly that there is also a boundary problem because the natural boundaries and administrative boundaries do not match. So sometimes city manager will say these are the part of the irrigation department or some other department, but ultimately river do not recognize any boundary. It just flows and it affects everyone. So I think that approach brought, and what you see as the URMP is a kind of trying to bring values of integrated urban water management or sustainable urban water management, and also trying to leverage the legal potential of the master plans, city master plan, and try to make them river sensitive. Similarly, try to make people also river sensitive. So I think that was the approach, and we also concentrated upon bringing students and academics into this picture by having several kinds of thesis competition and other kinds of things where they can all come, and ultimately making the city water sensitive and looking at all these things holistically in a true systems approach needs these kind of framework. So we tried to develop that, and they are absolutely essential because ultimately we have to become water positive and climate resilient cities, and cities and rivers are not separate. We have to thrive together. We actually have no other option but to work together. So I think that was the idea with which we tried to develop all these things, and I'm very happy that this is being developed, and we are actually trying to contribute to the body of knowledge in this emerging field of managing urban rivers, planning aspects as well as practicing aspects. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rajiv sir. I know if I have to just summarize your thing in one line, cleaning versus rejuvenation, right? So when we make that distinction, that's when I think the urban elements become a lot more prominent, right? We'll now move on to our next panelist, to Meera ma'am. Ma'am, you have been working in the wash sector for several years now. In fact, one of the tools that was presented earlier by Arva, the PAS, was also, you kind of co-developed that, right? My question to you is, when we talk about wash, there's a very strong linkage to managing urban rivers, right? What kind of implications does the PAS tool or the PAS tool, have for managing urban rivers? If you can just elaborate a bit on that, please.
Yeah, thank you, Uday, for these questions. But let me refer back to Shri Ashok Kumar ji and to Rajiv ji in terms of emphasizing the role of urban planning. I think that is very, very crucial in terms of looking at rivers as part of cities. I think historically rivers have been extremely important in those cities, and some of the early cities were in fact located on rivers. So rivers play a very crucial role in development and management of cities. So we should keep that in mind. But given the nature of the topic today, I'm going to focus more on, and I think I've been asked to do that, but also focus more on looking at the entire issues of how do you make our rivers clean and how do you eliminate pollution in our rivers, because that is something that is critical in terms of making use of rivers much better and making them the life of the city. So there are 2-3 things that have been critical in terms of the last 10 years of programs that we have seen. And again, both the speakers actually referred to that before. But the whole issue of looking at sanitation, particularly in terms of ensuring that the pollution from sanitation doesn't affect our rivers, that is something that is very, very critical. And this will require that universal access to sanitation services becomes possible. It has many other benefits, but especially for cities that are on rivers, this is added benefit of making our rivers clean. But this requires not just access at household level, because we need to look at the entire service chain of sanitation. And we need to make sure that the waste that is collected from the households is actually treated properly before the treated water is let out in the rivers in those cities that are situated on rivers. So this is very critical. It's also very critical to realize that a large number of our, especially small and medium towns, small and medium-sized towns in India do not really have sewerage systems. So I would guess about 50% population in Indian cities actually depends not on sewerage systems, but on what we refer to as on-site sanitation systems. And this is very important to keep in mind as we talk of how to make sure that our rivers remain proper and not polluted. One thing that we have found in our work in the cities in Maharashtra is that for online sanitation systems, scheduled desludging of septic tank facilities is critical. And this is something that we need to keep in mind. But it's also very important that used water management, and this is now becoming very, very important in the new programs of Swachh Bharat Mission or the Clean India Mission that is really being talked of. This is also being talked of in not only in Maharashtra, but in Varanasi. And Varanasi, the parts, although there are sewerage systems, there are parts that are not connected by sewerage systems, and these kind of efforts are very critical. So this is the third thing that is very important is, besides sanitation, in terms of looking at the sanitation systems and their services, used water management, because beyond toilets, you need to also look at how grey water or the used water is managed. Whereas this is now getting increasing focus in terms of the national programs being taken up in India. And so these are aspects that are very, very critical. Part of used water management is to collect it properly and make sure that treatment happens and reuse happens. So these are very critical aspects that will actually determine the kind of impact that our rivers will face over time. Now, you've asked me to speak of monitoring systems. So I'm going to talk in relation to these three aspects. What are the possible monitors? The first is ARVA already introduced the performance assessment system, is the sort of monitoring system for urban services. It looks at water supply, wastewater, as well as solid waste management, something that I think one of the earlier speakers also referred to. And this has been taken up in India on quite a large scale. We now have about 1,200 cities, and all large cities are actually being covered through this. So that is something that provides an annual monitoring of these services, and it makes it possible for cities themselves to review their progress, as well as state and national governments to review their progress. The second is a much more local monitoring system that we have introduced, linked to the scheduled desludging. We refer to as this nice name of SaniTrack, which actually helps monitor the performance of either the local government or the private service provider that provides scheduled desludging services. And it's a digital system, almost like your Amazon app, that it's actually working quite well in our cities. It is again being scaled up to a large number of cities in Maharashtra. So something that we've tried to do with our monitoring systems is that it doesn't remain confined to pilot cities, but is actually used in a large number of cities also. The third thing of monitoring that I wanted to just highlight quickly is that in one of the cities where we've supported the government to introduce scheduled desludging, we've monitored through a system to gauge the impact that schedule monitoring has helped on the quality of wastewater, quality of used water, effluent that actually flows. And the results are very, very positive. It's an expensive thing, something that cannot be done on a large scale, but it's something that's showing that the scheduled desludging is critical in terms of as we move forward and expanding our sanitation services.
Absolutely.
So this is it,
Thank you,
but I
thank you,
just
ma'am.
want to
Yes.
highlight a couple of points that beyond these monitoring systems, behavior change, and I think the earlier speakers again referred to this, is critical. And to me, the two aspects that are important in sort of relating the communities and citizens to rivers, one is religion and the other is recreation. And this is actually seen in many of our cities. Varanasi is a very good example. City where I come from, Ahmedabad, again, recreation has helped
If I can just
to
request you.
link the communities to rivers very well. So I think these are efforts that need
Sure,
to be taken up as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, absolutely. You pointed out to the correct link, between sanitation, on-site sanitation systems, used water, and managing urban rivers. Right. Thank you so much. We'll quickly move on to our next speaker, Alejandro. Right. Now, Alejandro, you've been working with on resilience approaches, and for quite some time now, right? So, what role do you see for rivers or urban rivers, in this resilience narrative, and how should that resilience approach be used to manage urban rivers? And Alejandro, if I may request you to please limit yourself to 3 minutes, so that we can kind of finish on time. Yeah, please. Thank you, Alejandro.
Yeah, thank you very much, Victor. And already there have been said a lot of very interesting points. But just to say that bringing to the resilience perspective, we wanted to highlight some of the elements that come across all these examples that have been presented. So one element has to do with the multi-scalar and multi-sectoral approach. This is fundamental for resilience, but then it's also fundamental for urban river governance. Another element I would like to highlight has to do with this integrating of different perspectives and values. As we have seen the different values and functions of rivers, we have to then consolidate in integrating the different actors into the discussion. Third, I would like also to highlight the elements of climate and how to better integrate rivers into the climate action, into the both adaptation and mitigation. And then how this discussion, rivers can, as has been said before, can be an element to integrate the different stakeholders, and then also discuss the different risks. And then climate is certainly, climate-related hazard is certainly something we have to discuss. And then another element that has to do with resilience is the combination of formal and informal governance. And this means that we are not only setting rules and standards, but we are also engaging with the stakeholders in different forms. I think the Rivers Alliance has been presented before in India. It's a wonderful initiative to also bring this forward, as well as a number of them informal dialogues, platforms, citizen engagement, participation. This has also been shared by NIUA in the framework. So these elements also constitute fundamental pieces of resilience. And in just 1 minute, we have been at CIWI working in a city water resilience framework that helps integrating this into an approach that has a multi-stakeholder, multi-scalar approach. I think some of the elements that Panchali related to this and where this can be discussed at the city level and move towards this river sensitive planning that we have been hearing about throughout the session. I'll stop there because of limited time.
Yes.
Thank you very much, and over to you, Victor.
Thank you so much, Alejandro. That was so useful. In fact, I really like what you said about formal and informal governance. That is required, in order to hit that right note, right? Talking about, you also talked about climate change, and I think that is a great time to bring in Katharina, who's been working in the domain of climate change, especially with its relation to urban resilience, for a very long time now. So Katharina, IPCC wants that going forward, if actions are not taken, we are likely to see major changes in flow in rivers, which is going to make it even more challenging to manage urban rivers, right? So according to what is the approach that we should be taking now? How do we go about things? What are the avenues? What are the tools there that we can adopt?
Thank you, Victor. It's been really inspiring to listen to all these great case studies, and Alejandro touched on many of these points I was going to raise. So without repeating too much, it is really important, given that we live in this time of high uncertainty and ever increasing climate impacts, that we are looking at sustainable river governance. The fragmentation that we have seen and that our speakers raised previously, right, really poses an increased risk for dealing with climate change, both on the resilience side, but also with the ability of cities to address climate change. So if we are looking at cities, and the fragmentation across multiple sectors and government agencies, each with their own priorities, that maybe even be conflicting in terms of sustainability and long-term resilience, that's an issue. If we are looking at cities in the context of river basins and these multi-scalar levels of responsibilities, this is concerning because the overlap, this patchwork of governance responsibilities and the current fragmentation leads to incoherence and possibly also inaction or ineffectiveness, because there's a lack of clear responsibilities, who owns what. And from the resilience perspective, we have to be concerned about issues of maladaptation, because there are these conflicting priorities that need to be reconciled and the needs from various stakeholder groups that need to be considered. So going back to also what Alejandro raised, it's really important to take a step back and to look at urban rivers from a sustainability point of view, and to acknowledge the many benefits that they can provide, and to move away from this single focused engineering approaches to embrace an approach that accommodates many benefits or objectives, such as ecological restoration and climate change mitigation and adaptation, health, social and economic benefits. And this requires a lot more complex governance approaches and also capacities. From the climate change perspective, when we're looking at pollution, for example, we can make a big dent, not only in terms of water security, but also in reducing emissions. Recent studies have actually shown that river pollution around urban centers is quite substantial and can have quite substantial emissions. We are currently not reporting that under the IPCC guidelines, but this is really an area of action that has also benefits for health, etc. So it is important to look perhaps also at climate planning models in cities and to modulate this integrated approach. I know that we are running out of time, so I leave you with that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Katharina. Actually, addressing multi-scalar and conflicting interests. I think what you said was very, very correct, and I think that's the approach that we need, to manage climate change concerns for urban river management. Thank you so much, Katharina. I'm now going to pass it on, to our colleague from UNDP, Marianne Kalen, who's a senior water advisor at UNDP, for her reflections and to conclude this session as well. Marianne, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. And given that we are actually over time, I will write up my reflections on the City River Connect over time and put it in the passable chat. So for now, what I will be doing, I just want to thank you all for these the presentations about the framework for embedding river governance into the broader urban and national politics in a participatory manner. I think that was emphasized in very many of the cases, and also the importance of embedding urban management into the broader river basin and related land and marine ecosystems, as well as multiple cities. And also now we touched a lot upon the climate connection. And also just want to say that right after this event, there is actually a discussion about role of rivers in climate change. So you might want to just tune in. I just put the link into the chat. Otherwise, I would just say generally rivers and societies, they're really coupled systems and that are really connected through culture. And I think rivers, they've always represented multiple or infinite values and as sacred and spiritual beings and sources of joy and recreation, as well as beauty and well-being. So let us cherish this fragile yet divinely important relation. So now I also want to thank all the participants for being here, the contributors, also the co-conveners, CEP University, National Institute of Urban Affairs, the UNDP Seaway Water Governance Facility, and the Stockholm International Water Institute, and also Panchali for connecting us all and making this event happen and in a somewhat timely manner. I think we are closing very, very soon. So
Absolutely.
Thank you again, and see you during the World Water Week. See you on Pathable. See you maybe in the next event too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.
चलिए निकल जाओ